All right, let's jump right in and take a deep dive into this article you sent over about astronaut salaries. I gotta say, it's a lot more complex than I initially thought.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
We tend to think of astronauts as these almost mythical figures,
Right.
but when you start looking at the nitty-gritty of how they get paid,
It gets
it
real.
gets really interesting, yeah. So this article we've got is from 2024, and it mentions that NASA astronauts, they get paid according to the general schedule,
Hmm.
just like other government employees, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So we talking like GS-12, GS-13 levels here?
Most of them fall somewhere in that range, yeah.
Mm.
Between GS-12 and GS-13,
Yeah.
which, based on the 2024 rates, would put their salary somewhere between $84,365 and $115,079 a year.
Okay, not bad.
Not bad at all.
Sounds pretty reasonable, right?
Right.
For a job that requires you to, rocket into space.
Right.
But then the article throws in this little twist. It says NASA's own website lists astronaut salaries at $152,258 a year. And if we go back even further, like back to 2020 when they were recruiting new candidates, they were advertising a salary range of $104,898 to $161,141. That corresponds to GS-13 to GS-14.
Yeah, so that's quite a difference there.
Right, so it's like, why is there this gap
Exactly.
between the standard GS scale and what NASA's actually shelling out?
Yeah, and the article doesn't really give us a straight answer,
No.
but it definitely hints that there's more to the story.
Okay, so we've got a bit of a mystery on our hands.
Right.
Could it be things like hazard pay for, the obvious risks
It could be.
of space travel? Or maybe some kind of premium for those, unique skills that you need to operate a spacecraft?
Absolutely. Those are all great guesses. The article doesn't go into specifics, but it wouldn't be surprising at all
Great.
if those were part of the equation.
Yeah. Okay, so we've been talking about NASA, but let's zoom out a little bit
Yeah.
and look at how the U.S. stacks up against other space agencies around the world. A little bit of a global perspective.
Full International Space Race Salary Edition.
Exactly. Salary edition. So who are we comparing ourselves to here?
Well, first, let's take a look at Roscosmos, the Russian space agency. Back in 2021, aspiring cosmonauts were making just shy of $47,220 a year.
Okay.
Well, those who had already earned their space wings were taking home around $78,696 annually.
Okay, so that's quite a difference compared to those NASA figures.
Yeah.
All right, what about the European Space Agency, ESA?
Oh, ESA. They have a very interesting system. Their salaries are tied to both rank and the astronaut's home country.
Okay.
But here's the real kicker.
What's that?
Their astronaut salaries are completely exempt from income tax.
Whoa, no taxes.
Yeah, imagine that. Not having to worry about Uncle Sam taking a cut of your space earnings.
That's a pretty sweet deal.
Pretty sweet.
But even with that tax break, are ESA astronauts still earning less than their American counterparts?
Overall, yes, a new recruit could expect to earn somewhere between $77,748 and $81,336 a year. And a seasoned astronaut, one who's already completed a spaceflight, could make between $111,492 and $116,628 annually.
So still, respectable,
Definitely.
especially with that tax exemption on top of it.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of curious, like, why does ESA offer that tax exemption?
Yeah.
Is it to attract top talent, from across Europe?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it just some quirky European thing?
It's tough to say for sure, but it definitely makes you think about the different ways countries try to build their space programs.
Yeah, different incentives.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've been focusing on civilian astronauts, but what about those coming from a military background? Does their pay structure follow, like, the same rules?
Ah, that's where it gets even trickier.
Okay.
Military astronauts in the U.S., they don't actually leave their military careers
Oh, interesting.
when they join NASA.
Okay.
They're essentially on loan to
Yeah.
NASA for a set period.
So they keep their military rank and pay while they're up there doing spacewalks and experiments. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
Talk about a career perk.
Exactly. Their salary is based on their rank, time in service, and performance within the military.
Makes sense.
The article highlights a couple examples. Matthew Dominic, a U.S. Navy commander, was making around $98,395 per year based on his rank in 2020. And then there's Raja Shari, a brigadier general in the U.S. Air Force, who was earning a considerably higher salary of $127,666 annually in 2023.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Someone with the rank of brigadier general probably has a lot more experience and responsibility than a Navy commander,
Yeah, absolutely.
even if they're both astronauts.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing they also get all those standard military benefits on top of that, like healthcare, housing allowances, all that stuff.
Oh, for sure.
So getting the best of both worlds, serving their country, exploring space, and getting compensated by both the military and NASA.
It's a pretty sweet gig.
Yeah. Okay, so we've covered NASA, other government agencies. Now, what about those private companies that are really making waves these days, like SpaceX and Blue Origin?
Right.
Are we starting to see, a new breed of private astronaut with their own unique salary structures?
That's really the next frontier in this whole exploration of astronaut salaries. And honestly, it's a bit of a black box.
Oh.
The private sector is, well, private about their finances.
Right, that's fair.
Yeah.
But we do have companies like Axiom sending private citizens up to space now.
Right.
And it's not just like wealthy tourists.
Yeah.
They're also working with smaller agencies and countries that don't have their own like full-fledged space programs.
You're right. Axiom's playing a really interesting role in making space accessible to a much wider range of people and organizations.
Mm-hmm.
They're essentially acting as a bridge between those who want to go to space and those who have the rockets to get them there.
Okay, so it sounds like there are these professional private astronauts out there,
Right.
but their salaries are, a bit of a secret.
A bit of a mystery.
The article does mention former NASA astronauts, Peggy Whitson and Michael Lopez Allegri, who are now commanding missions for Axiom.
Oh, wow.
Any guesses on what their paychecks might look like?
It's really tough to say for sure, but given their experience and the high stakes nature of their work, I wouldn't be surprised if they were being compensated very well.
Yeah, I think that's a safe bet, especially with space tourism becoming more and more popular.
Definitely.
I have a feeling that the demand for these private astronauts is only going to increase, which could drive those salaries even higher.
It's definitely a possibility. The rise of space tourism and the emergence of all these companies, SpaceX, Blue Origin, Axiom, it's really introducing a new dynamic to the space industry.
Yeah.
It's almost like we're witnessing the birth of a commercial space age, and it's really hard to say how it will all shake out in terms of pay and compensation.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's all very new and exciting territory.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling when you think about how much the space industry has changed, even in just the last few years.
It really is. And all this change makes you wonder how it's going to affect the astronaut profession. Like down the line, we're talking about potentially building lunar bases,
Right.
sending crewed missions to Mars. These are incredibly complex and dangerous
Oh, yeah.
missions. I mean, they require a whole new level of expertise.
Right, exactly. It's not just about being a skilled pilot or a scientist anymore. You'd need people who specialize in fields like planetary geology, space medicine, maybe even like space construction.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the ultimate interdisciplinary team, You'd need
Like,
experts from all these different fields working together
yeah,
seamlessly.
that's a good point. And that could lead to a huge surge in demand for astronauts with very specific skill sets,
Right.
which could totally change how we think about like the value
Yeah.
and how we compensate
How
them.
we paid them.
Yeah, exactly. But even within the system we have now, there are these kind of subtle factors
Yes.
beyond just rank and experience that can affect an astronaut's overall pay.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, so let's dig into that a little bit. The article mentions mission type and duration.
Okay.
I mean, it makes sense that like a 6-month mission to the International Space Station would come with a bigger paycheck
Right.
than a shorter research flight.
You would think so, right?
Yeah.
But the article, it kind of suggests that longer or more complex missions don't necessarily mean a huge bump in pay, at least not publicly.
Oh, interesting.
There might be bonuses or allowances, for specific mission requirements, but those details are usually kept pretty quiet.
I see. So it's not all about just racking up those frequent flyer miles in space.
Exactly.
It seems like a lot of it comes down to those intrinsic rewards.
Yeah.
The thrill of discovery, pushing those human
Right,
limits.
that sense of adventure.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, exactly. But we can't forget about all the training that goes into becoming an astronaut.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, you practically need a PhD.
At least a master's, probably.
Yeah, just to get your foot in the door.
Yeah.
So does all that education, does that actually translate to a higher starting salary?
Well, it's interesting because once you're in that astronaut corps,
Mm-hmm.
most agencies kind of treat everyone relatively equally in terms of pay,
Oh,
regardless of their academic background. Of course, NASA's a bit of an outlier because of that whole GS scale versus military pay thing we were talking about earlier.
right, right. That makes sense. It's like becoming an astronaut is its own level up.
Yeah, exactly.
It transcends those traditional markers of education and experience.
It's its own thing.
Yeah, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
But here's another interesting thing the article brings up: language proficiency.
Oh, yeah, that's fascinating.
So it can actually play a role in an astronaut's compensation.
Think about it. If you're working on the International Space Station,
Mm-hmm.
you need to be able to communicate with astronauts from all over the world.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
So knowing Russian
Yeah.
or Mandarin, that could be a really valuable asset, almost like a bonus skill.
Like a special qualification?
Exactly,
Yeah.
especially for missions with international collaboration. It could open doors
Yeah.
to more opportunities, maybe even lead to a higher salary or bonuses. Who knows, maybe someday being a polyglot will be just as essential as knowing how to, like, pilot a spacecraft.
That's an interesting thought, yeah. So, wow, we've seen how all these seemingly unrelated factors can affect astronaut salaries.
Hmm.
But let's step outside the astronaut world for a bit.
All right.
How do those salaries compare to other professions in the space industry? Like,
Mm.
what about the engineers and scientists who work at, NASA, SpaceX, Blue Origin?
Right, right. That's a great question, and it's something the article actually addresses.
Oh,
It turns out the private sector often offers more lucrative opportunities, especially for those technical roles.
that's interesting.
Like, for example, a NASA engineer might earn between $54,557 and $73,038 per year,
Okay.
depending on their education level. But over at SpaceX, aerospace engineers can make anywhere from $95,000 to $175,000 annually.
Wow. Okay. So if you're looking to make bank in the space industry, maybe SpaceX is the way to go.
It's definitely worth considering, and it's not just SpaceX.
Yeah.
Blue Origin is also known for their competitive salaries. They've got listed salaries for engineers that often start at $110,000, $120,000,
Wow.
and go as high as $324,000 for a chief engineer. And even non-technical roles can command some pretty impressive salaries. Like an entry-level admin position at Blue Origin might start around $42,000, while a senior environmental lawyer at SpaceX could earn up to $260,000.
It sounds like the private sector is really putting their money where their mouth is
Yeah,
when it comes to attracting top talent.
absolutely.
Do you think this could lead to a kind of a brain drain from government agencies like NASA?
It's definitely a valid concern. If the private sector keeps offering significantly higher salaries and more room for growth, it could be really tough for government agencies to compete for the best engineers,
Yeah.
scientists, and even astronauts.
But it's not all about the money, right? Like, working at NASA, it comes with a certain prestige,
Right.
a sense of history.
Yeah, a sense of purpose.
You're part of something bigger than yourself.
You're absolutely right. There's a certain allure to working for an organization like NASA. Yeah.
That goes beyond just the paycheck. It's about contributing to scientific discovery,
Yeah.
pushing the boundaries of what's possible, inspiring the next generation.
It's almost like the difference between being a rock star and being a classical musician.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Both incredibly talented,
Yeah.
but driven by different things, operating in different worlds.
And I think that really highlights the fact that the space industry is becoming more and more diverse,
Right.
offering all these different career paths
Yeah.
and ways of thinking about compensation.
So it begs the question, though, what happens to astronaut salaries when we start talking about those really ambitious missions?
Right.
Like building a lunar base, sending a crewed mission to Mars. Do you think will those ventures require such a specialized and dedicated workforce
Mm-hmm.
that salaries will just skyrocket?
Right.
Or will it still be more about, the
The
mission?
mission itself.
Yeah, than the money. Yeah. Those are big questions, and the article doesn't really give us any, definitive answers. It kind of just hints at the possibilities. While government agencies like NASA, they haven't publicly announced any major salary increases for lunar missions.
Yeah.
The private sector is already kind of charging ahead with new opportunities,
Mm.
new compensation structures. Axiom, for example, they're leading the way for
Yeah.
this new generation of private astronauts.
It's exciting to think about what the future holds for them.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But before we get too lost in speculation, let's take a step back
Okay.
and just kind of recap what we've learned about astronauts' salaries so far.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We really have. It's amazing how many different things factor into those astronaut salaries.
It is, we started with that, the GS pay scale and government regulations.
Right.
And now we're talking about the private sector, lunar missions, Mars missions.
It's like trying to solve a cosmic equation, right?
Yeah, it really is.
You've got the base salary, the rank, experience, mission type, education, language skills, and then you throw in the private sector.
Right, and then the future of space exploration.
Right, exactly. All these different variables.
Yeah, and we can't forget about those, those less tangible factors too.
You're right. Those intrinsic motivations, that passion for pushing the boundaries.
Exactly, that desire to be part of something bigger than yourself.
Yeah, I mean the allure of the unknown, the challenge of overcoming these seemingly impossible obstacles,
Right.
and that awe of seeing our planet from a completely different perspective.
It makes you wonder, what's it going to take to attract the best and the brightest to these future missions?
Mm,
Will it be, a huge paycheck, or will it be something more, something deeper?
that's a great question. It reminds me of that famous quote from JFK's moon speech. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Oh, yeah, such a good quote.
Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills.
It really captures the spirit of space exploration perfectly.
It does.
Yeah.
It's about pushing those boundaries, about striving for something greater than ourselves.
Hmm.
And maybe, just maybe, that spirit is what will ultimately shape how astronaut salaries evolve in the future.
Yeah.
Maybe it won't be about matching those crazy Silicon Valley CEO salaries,
Right.
but about creating a system that recognizes and rewards those unique skills and that dedication, the sacrifice that it takes to venture out beyond Earth.
It's a really interesting thought. And as we move into this new era of space exploration,
Yeah,
it's going to be fascinating to see how those compensation models actually, change and develop.
absolutely.
Will we see more performance-based bonuses tied to specific mission objectives?
Hmm.
Will private companies offer equity stakes
Wow.
to incentivize their astronauts? Will there be like a global standard for astronaut pay?
Yeah,
Or will each nation, each company kind of do their own thing?
so many possibilities. It's like we're standing at the edge of a new frontier,
It really is.
not just in terms of space exploration, but in how we think about rewarding those who make it all possible.
It's a good reminder that the future, it's not set in stone. It's something that we create through our choices, investments.
Exactly.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. We went from the nuts and bolts of pay scales and government regulations to these, bigger questions about human ambition.
It has been quite the journey.
It really has. And how we value those who push those boundaries, those who dare to explore.
I've really enjoyed it.
Me too. It's a topic that just sparks so much curiosity
It really does.
and makes you think about things in a different way.
And it makes you, dream a little bit
Yeah,
about the future.
about a future where humanity's reach goes, far beyond our planet.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on this journey. And of course, a huge thank you to our listener for sending in this amazing topic. Until next time, keep looking up at those stars and keep dreaming big.